one last 10-minute video. This one is on psychological disorders and abnormal psychology. I'm posting a lot of video links for this week that go over the specific disorders. So what I wanted to take a couple minutes is just introducing psychological disorders, really. Right off the bat on this first slide, note that first statistic. More than 44 million Americans suffer from a mental health disorder. And I really want to focus on that for a minute. That's saying about 1 in 7 people, if you look at how many Americans there are, about 1 in 7 have a mental health disorder. Now think about that. Take a moment and really just think. Could you see 1 in 7 having a psychological disorder? If you're walking through the mall, if you're in a classroom, it's saying that in the mall, if you walk through the mall, what do you pass? Maybe 200 people, something like that. That's saying that thereabouts of 30 are going to have a mental health disorder. You wouldn't notice 30 people walking. Walking through the mall. You wouldn't notice so many people who have a mental health disorder. So there is a fine line between normal and abnormal, and I really want to focus on this for a second. Having a mental health disorder is not meant to be a negative thing, or not. The diagnosis is not meant to be a negative thing. The diagnosis is meant to demystify, to clarify, to give you an idea of what is going on and why. But sometimes someone can get a mental health diagnosis and they can think that it is a crutch, that it is something that they are dealing with extra baggage, if you will. But here's the thing. Someone can be diagnosed with a mental health disorder and barely have the criteria to the point where you wouldn't notice that person having that disorder on any given day. But that person's still diagnosed the same as someone who suffers and is noticeably suffering from it every single day. Take, for example, schizophrenia. Someone can have severe paranoid schizophrenia, have to be institutionalized, that they are suffering from hallucinations and delusions on a daily basis. Someone else could be diagnosed with schizophrenia because they have a hallucination or a delusion on average once per calendar year. It's the same diagnosis, but there is such a difference in the severity there. Now you're looking at an individual that could be one of your good friends that you wouldn't have known unless they told you that they had this disorder. They miss school 1 day or 2 days in a semester, and you think, oh, they probably are just sick. It's not meant to be a crutch by any means. It is meant to help you. The problem then becomes, because there is that fine line between normal and abnormal, we think that it means something significant. But the truth is, if you look at this in terms of more physiological illnesses, you don't blame that person for getting the flu. You don't think that that person that has the flu has this negative thing towards them. And it shouldn't be any different when we look at mental health. The problem with mental health is the stigma behind it. It is a stigma that I'm very happy to say has become less and less over the past 10 years. But it is nevertheless still a stigma that some people do still walk through life with. There are individuals who don't seek mental health because they don't want to pursue those answers. And that is an upsetting part. Having a psychological disorder is just having one or more of the following. Right there on that slide. Even atypical, dangerous to the self or to others, distressful or disturbing to the person, dysfunctional, maladaptive. It is not meant to be this big negative thing that some people may pursue it as. Being able to understand what is going on in your mind is so important, and I really want to highlight one important thing. We deal with so much every single day. To think that our mental health will never have some form of negative events to it. I believe personally that it is way more than 1 in 7 that deal with mental health issues at any point in their life. I think that almost everyone will. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're dealing with a mental health diagnosis, a disorder that would be diagnosed. It could be something like a depressive episode, for example. With that said, though, we wouldn't look at someone that just got sick, they got the flu, and say, oh, that's their fault. Why may some people look at it differently for mental health? We're dealing with so much. There's ups and downs of life every single day. To think that we could never have the down that might end up leading towards us needing to pursue talking to a therapist or talking to someone. I think that's a very naive thought, to think that no one should ever get to that, or that you should never get to that. If you are struggling with things, talk to someone. I hope that's the big thing that this class has really taught you and gotten through to you, that it helps everyone. Now, the specific disorders, I think the videos that I'm posting for you are going to do very well with. And I'm skipping to slide 5 really quick right now. The way that we diagnose mental health disorders, we use something called the DSM. We're in the 5th edition, so the DSM-5. Now, using the slide before, we use that through the medical model here, which means that we diagnose based off of symptoms. And there's one last thing I want to really mention towards this. When we're diagnosing off of symptoms, it means that we are saying yes or no, someone has a symptom. That means that if we look at things at the end and we look at the symptoms you have, that equals the diagnosis that we give. Sure, that is something that's important, especially for health insurance providers. But with that said, that might mean that we can easily misdiagnose someone, or really more accurately, end up diagnosing someone with more than one disorder. We might be able to, if we were using from slide 4, the biopsychosocial model, be able to identify one pressing disorder. That if we were able to treat and lessen the symptoms from that disorder, now that person wouldn't have some other disorder. But because we diagnose specifically off of symptoms, they might end up diagnosed with several different disorders, with more than one different disorder. And that could be a very big negative of using this model. Now, with that said, this model is very important for health insurance providers, and it does get us to a diagnosis that someone could need. It just has some extra potential disadvantages there, which is what that highlights. Now, as far as the rest of this chapter, the disorders, as you go through everything, the disorders, they do a very good job with the videos that I have posted there. So you're going to see information on just about every single one of these disorders that are right here. The only thing I will really quickly mention, I will highlight the video for dissociative disorders is an excellent video. Pay attention to, as this person talks about going through all the different personalities that they have. It's something very, very noteworthy and very important to really listen to that video, I think. And the other one that I really want to highlight is the video on borderline personality disorder. And the video for borderline personality disorder, just pay attention to how articulate this woman is, to how intelligent this woman seems, that she suffers from such a severe disorder. The borderline personality cases, I had a professor from graduate school that described them perfect. And she said, when you are dealing with someone with borderline, that story will stand out so much that you won't talk about any other cases. And it really is. You can hopefully see that. This is someone who could be walking into the supermarket with their closest friend. They go down aisle 4, their friend goes down aisle 5 just because they needed different things. But halfway down aisle 4, that person looks, doesn't see their friend, and they think they were abandoned. That would be this idea of psychosis, an inability to determine what's real and what's fantasy. That's actually on slide 19. And then they lose control of their emotions. They start having a extreme emotional response to this, screaming, crying in the middle of aisle 4. That's the neurosis part. And it could be a very, very powerful diagnosis, and really being able to look at that in that video, I think can help quite a bit. And everything else pretty much has some videos that are based off of it, so I'm not going to focus on anything else. But if you have questions about anything, you shoot me a message, and I can always record another video going over 1 or 2 of the disorders in more detail. All right.